right, there we go.
Put it off to the side.
So yeah, this is me.
That's the one.
I've been turning about
Oh, okay.
15, 16 years, and I love it. I absolutely love it. I'm very happy I found wood turning kind of on the younger end of the scale, and I hope to be doing this for another 40 years or so. So this is what we're going to start out doing this morning. It's a little tough to see, but this is multi-axis with a twist. Some of you may have done seen a demo or done a class with Barbara Dill. I know Jim said she was here fairly recently, within maybe the last couple years.
About 2 years ago.
We're going to do something like that. She has her technique. I have a little bit different technique. I like mine better, and I hope by the end of this you will too. So this is a lidded box. This one happens to be olive, and this is what I call a right-hand twist. From the top to the bottom, twist from the left to the right as you go from top to bottom. This is another one. This is some sort of rosewood, Bolivian rosewood, I believe, and this one has a left-hand twist. So from the top to the bottom, it twists from the right to the left. And we can control the direction of the twist, and I'll go through how we do that. This is a peppermill, cocobolo, again with that right-hand twist on it, 3 sides with a twist. This is kind of my take on a Rudy Olsenick candlesticks. Rudy has those very elegant, come down to a very narrow waist. I'm not that good, but these 3 sides with a 120-degree twist, and they twist in opposite directions. I didn't used to know which direction it was going to go when I was doing the numbering. I've since figured it out. So when I was doing these, I just numbered them at the same time, but I numbered them opposite. I'm going to take you through the process of how we actually number those. Different style of twisted lidded box. There it is, open. And I made a pair of them. And I show this because I get to tell a little bit of a funny story. I used to run a club in Arizona. I now run one of the clubs in Chicago. And Phoenix got the AAW Symposium in 2014, which is a ton of work. It's a ridiculous amount of work. And leading up to that, anyone here a member of WOW, the World of Woodturners?
Yeah.
Okay, a few hands. WOW usually has a swap at a lot of the symposiums. And I knew I wanted to participate, but I knew it was going to be super, super busy. So I decided I'm going to make this piece in like March. So I know that I'm going to have it done and ready because I'm going to run out of time by the time the symposium comes around in June. One of the things our club in Phoenix did is we had a bring back. So it was kind of a perpetual exchange. So I win the bring back from whoever brought it in from the prior month. I have to commit to bringing a piece in the next month. So I made the commitment to bring a piece in, and I realized it's Easter, I'm going to be out of town, but I'll make one and I'll get it to somebody who can bring it to the meeting. I don't have to be at the meeting, but my piece has to make it to the meeting. We happened to be demoing at I think the county fair, and one of the club members was there and said, are you going to go to the club meeting next month? And he said, yeah. And I said, okay, so I'm going to give you this and you're going to bring it. So I ended up making 2 of these. One for the bring back exchange that I had won, that I had to bring back in, I guess it was April, and one for the AAW Symposium in June. So I just made 2 of them. The guy who was supposed to bring it to the meeting forgot. So my vice president at the time was super awesome. He went back to the instant gallery. He took his piece off from the gallery table and gave it to the guy who won the bring back for that month, with the understanding that when my piece got in the next month, he got my piece, and the guy who won the piece that he ended up with. Anyway, flash forward to June, AAW Symposium. We're at the WOW Exchange. At that time, they were doing raffle tickets, and they were drawing numbers. They've now changed. They now do business cards, which is much nicer because you can just say Jason and John, as opposed to 237 and 241. So they were doing the exchange. They call out a number. One guy, my vice president, gets up and goes up front, and they call out the other number, and nobody gets up. And I'm talking with some other people on the side, and they call out the number again, and nobody gets up, and they call out the number a 3rd time and say, okay, people, check your tickets. I'm like, oh crap. Oh yeah, that's me. So I went up front and we exchanged pieces, and I didn't realize it until after the exchange. And they pointed out to everyone in the room, because there were a few people laughing. like these are the president and the vice president of the local club, and they got paired together. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I made these two things for two completely separate events. And in some circumstance, some happenstance, he ended up with both of them. And he still complains that they're not identical. So here's another, what this was a President's Challenge we did was a tool handle. So I did multi-axis with the twist and the curly maple there. Some other scenarios. We probably won't have time. I typically try to do some of these multi-axis spindle samples. We're running a little bit short on time today, but you know, some other examples of some multi-axis, and some of these were for another President's Challenge that we did goblets. Multi-axis spheres. Saw a demo a number of years ago by Christian Burchard out of Oregon, and he was doing some multi-axis spheres, so played around with that a little bit. This was, again, another President's Challenge. We were to do rice bowls. So this was my take on a rice bowl. It doesn't have a twist on it, but it is turned on 3 axes on the outside. My favorite entry from that President's Challenge was a guy who turned like a propeller bowl, about 2 inches wide, about 10 or 12 inches long. When it's on the lathe, it's whipping around like a propeller. And then he glued 10 little grains of rice on one end, and he turned a little ebony bowling ball and glued it on the other end. So that was his rice bowl. Hans Weisflog style lidded box with the lattice work. We'll talk about Hans a little bit more later. Some multi-axis pendants, a few more. And my daughter approached me. She was ending 5th grade. She had 2 or 3 days left to go in the school year. And she was going from elementary to middle school. She came to me about 2 or 3 days before the end of the school year and said, "Dad, could you make some pendants for my crew?" You have a crew? That's news to me. And I said, "No, I won't. I won't make you pendants for your crew. I'll help you make pendants for your crew." So we went out to the shop, and she got to pick the coin pearls, which are actually a seashell. They're drilled actually this way through the piece. They're kind of flat. So she got to pick out the colors. She picked out the really nice pua shell for hers. And then we absolutely don't have time to do this today, but I have this one up on the table. This is my Taurus. It's a donut-shaped hollow form. There's another one. And then this is, we're going to do this after the break. And this is what the guys in the class did yesterday. These are my Saturn bowls. So we'll get into this in more depth, but you can see that the grain lines up. It's one piece of wood, it's never been apart, but the rings are able to rotate. So you can move the bowl off center, you can play with the grain, move it in different directions. So that's what we're going to do this afternoon. But we're going to start with multi-axis first. All right. So that should come back up. All right. Any questions so far? All right. So we're going to start off on the board. I'm going to show you guys initially how to do the layout and the numbering to do the twist. So we're going to do this lidded box. We'll pass it around. It's turned on with 3 faces, 120 degrees, twist on each face. And the first thing we need to do is we need to do the layout. And we'll do this a couple of times. We'll do it once here on the board, and then we'll do it once actually on the piece before we go to put it on the lid. So this is the piece I'm going to use. It's about 3-inch square, probably maple. I'm going to mark one of the corners of the blank, like that. And when I rotate the blank, I'm always going to keep that corner up. That's my reference corner. And all of my points and layout that we're going to do here is based around this reference corner. So in looking at this, this is my reference corner. When I do this, I like to think of, I have a top and a bottom of a lidded box. I like to think of the top of the box as A and the bottom of the box as B. Doesn't really matter, but that's just how I tend to think of things to keep everything consistent in my head. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to take that reference corner, I'm going to draw a diagonal line corner to corner from this corner down to there. Same thing on the other end. Very simple. We're trying to find the true center of our blank. I'm going to go diagonally corner to corner the other direction, but I'm only going to do a little tick mark in the center. And I'll explain why I don't do a full diagonal in just a minute. Then I'm going to take a compass. I'm going to set the compass on this center mark, and I'm going to draw a circle. Same thing on the other end, same radius on both circles. Where the line crosses the circle, it crosses at two different points. There, and there, and there. One of these points, and it's always, I always do the one closest to the reference corner, is going to be one of my 3 axes. Now I need to find the other 2 axes. All I have to do that is put the compass on the point opposite my reference corner, further away from my reference corner, and I draw another circle, which it should go right through the center of my blank. Same thing on the other end, just like that. I no longer need that point. I can ignore that point. All I needed that for was to put my compass at that point. Where the 2 circles overlap, I now have 2 other points. These are my 3 points, and they're exactly 120 degrees apart. Very, very easy way to do this. I do this demo at my local rockler, woodcraft, or club events or whatever. I don't even bring a compass. I borrow a nickel or a quarter or something from somebody in the audience and just put it on there and trace it. And then shift it and trace it. And if it's off a little bit, it's off a little bit. It's not the end of the world. So we've got our 3 points, and these 3 points are parallel. This point is parallel with this one, this point is parallel with this one, and this point is parallel with this one. We need to number our points now. So if you saw Barbara Dill demo, or if you've taken her class, she numbers the points parallel. So she makes this point number 1, and this point number 1. And this is 2, and this is 2, and this is 3, and this is 3. And then when she puts it on the lathe to do the twist, she puts it on 1 to 2 and turns that face, and then 2 to 3 and turns that face, and then
3 to 1.
3 to 1 and turns that face. And I don't know if that's a right hand twist or a left hand twist. And if it's 1 to 2 and I drop the piece on the floor when I'm moving the axes or whatever, if I put it on this way, it's not 1 to 2. It has to be, I assume, 2 to 1. I'm not sure. I would get confused. So here's how I do it. This is my method. This is always point number 1. So starting on side A, which I consider to be the top, this is always point number 1. And I'm just simply going to number this clockwise. So this becomes point number 2, and this becomes point number 3. Everyone with me? Very simple. On the opposite side, side B, I do not want that to be point number 1 because these 2 points are parallel. I don't want that to be point number 1. Barbara would put number 1 there. I'm not going to do that. I can put number 1 here, or I can put number 1 here. This is a right-hand twist. This is a left-hand twist. I prefer a right-hand twist. I don't know why. Aesthetically, it's just a little more pleasing to me. So I'll put number 1 there, and then this side goes counterclockwise. So this becomes 2, and this becomes 3. Now when I put it on the lathe, it's 1 to 1, turn that face. 2 to 2, turn that face. 3 to 3, turn that face. 1 to 1 this way is still 1 to 1 this way. Doesn't matter which way I put it on the lathe. With Barbara's method, it matters. 1 to 2 this way is not 1 to 2 this way, it's 2 to 1 this way. So I just find this easier, less confusing. I know this is going to be a right-hand twist. Again, if I wanted to number it the other direction, instead of putting 1 here, I could put 1 here, still go counterclockwise. That becomes 2, and that becomes 3. Any questions? Yes?
The left-hand one is the top and the right-hand one is the bottom?
It doesn't really matter, but yes, I tend to think of this as the top and this as the bottom.
Are A and B on the same edge?
Yes, it's this reference corner. So A is here,
Yeah.
that reference corner. Rotate around that corner, B is here.
Same edge.
That's why I marked that.
Top and bottom.
Shouldn't you have drawn it with the B down there then?
No, it's top and bottom.
You mean just on the grass?
So this is A, I'm going to rotate around, this is B.
It's top and bottom big.
You'll see it.
A
We're
is
gonna
top
do it
and B
here in
is
just a
bottom.
second. Any questions about this?
Go for it.
Are we sure? Everybody got it?
Go for it. Let's see it.
All right, we're gonna do this.
You're right back here.
So I've done this demo enough times that almost every time, if I wait long enough, somebody points out that 2 and 2 are parallel. It looks like they're parallel, doesn't it? They're both
In the position.
they're both in that position.
But no, they're not on the bottom.
But they're not when you turn it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're drawing in 2 dimensions, but we have to think in 3 dimensions.
Wanna be
So
here,
here's
wanna
how
be-
I'm gonna do
I'm
this.
gonna be here.
I'm gonna put a mark on my hand where number 2 is,
All right.
right? I'm gonna put a mark on this hand where number 2 is, right? Do we agree those are both in kind of the same position that number 2 is on?
Yeah.
So this one, if I rotate my hands this way, this one's on the back of my hand, closest to my thumb. This one's on the front of my hand,
Right.
closest to the, not the palm, whatever this is. So we're drawing in 2 dimensions, but we have to think in 3 dimensions. So it looks like they're parallel, but they're actually not. All right, so let's do this for real now.
Cool, thanks.
So we probably want to be, we can only do overhead on that one, right?
Does it make a difference in how big the circle is originally?
It does, great question. I have an example. So the question was, does the diameter of the circle that we draw have an impact on our final piece? It does. I'll pass these around. I didn't measure these, I just eyeballed them. But they're basically the same dimensions. Start off, they're just poplar. This one has a much smaller circle, this one has a much larger circle. Looking at the ends, this one, it has 3 faces, but it's pretty round. This one has 3 faces, but it's much more triangular. This one has much more pronounced corners, this one has much less pronounced corners. But I'm pretty close to turning away those points, so there's more risk to it. But it does have an impact on how the piece looks. It doesn't impact the amount of twist or anything else, it's just the flatness or the curvedness of the faces.
So the larger the
Start them
circle,
on the ends.
the more impact,
Yes,
more pronounced.
yes. And the faces are flatter, the corners are more pronounced. It's much riskier though. So you gotta kind of weigh that a little bit. You're much more likely to turn away your points. If you turn away your points, you're gonna have to adjust things.
I may
But-
have done that before, right?
Once or twice. And that's why I number on the inside of my circle. If I put my numbers on the outside of my circle, when I'm on this face, I'm going to turn that and my number's gone. And we can figure it out, and I'll talk about how we figure out which face is which if we happen to do that. But save yourself the headache and number on the inside of your circle. All right, so let's do this. All right, I hope you guys can see this okay. So this is my reference corner. I'm going to rotate, when I rotate, I always make sure that reference corner is pointed up. That just helps prevent me from getting things twisted around. So we're going to take a straight edge, and we're going to go corner to corner. I'm going to take the straight edge while I'm here. I'm going to go corner to corner the other direction. Why?
Hang on 1 second.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can turn that light off. It's glaring on the screen.
So why do I
How's that
only?
better?
Just one, you get the other one.
Why do I only go the little tick mark in the center? I don't go fully corner to corner because I don't want 4 places where the line crosses my circle. I only want those 2 points. So that's why I only do a little tick mark in the center to find my actual true center.
What's your head?
Let's see if I can turn the big lights off.
One day when you come back here, we'll have it.
Maybe.
Get it like they did yesterday.
You on the power line to that?
Yeah, but it
That's
cuts off
off
everything.
everything.
Yeah.
Likes my stick.
Yeah.
Why didn't you put grabbers on it? Well, you just yank it toward it.
There you go.
All right, so the circle I've just picked kind of a random radius here.
That help?
Yeah. Yep.
I'm putting it on that center point and I'm drawing a circle. Same thing on the opposite end. Not getting much of a line on this end.
You draw the same size circle on the top and the bottom.
I do. You don't have to, but I do. And it just, I set the radius and it just stays that. Where was the question at? Okay. I tend to do the same size circle on both ends. You don't have to, but I tend to do that. So this is my reference corner. So this is one of my 3 points. I'm going to put the compass opposite that point, again where the line crosses the circle. And if I draw another circle, you don't really need to do a full circle, we just need to do a little arc there. It should go right through,
There you go.
right through my center point.
There you go.
So I now have 3 points. Where's my marker? I have a point here, I have a point here, and I have a point here. This point is not used other than to draw the second circle. Same thing on this end. So we're going to go right to that point. Again, opposite my reference corner up here. Draw my arc or my circle. And I have a point there, there, and there. Again, I no longer use that point. So now we need to do the numbering. Doesn't matter which side is A or B. We'll call this A, but it doesn't really matter. This is point number 1. And now which direction do I go?
Clockwise.
Clockwise. So this becomes 2, and this becomes 3.
Right.
Now I'm going to rotate around that reference corner. This is my point closest to the reference corner. On side B, I do not want that to be point number 1. I can put 1 down here, that's a right-hand twist. 1 over here, that's a left-hand twist. I'm going to do number 1 right here. And now which direction do I go? Counterclockwise. So this becomes 2, and this becomes 3. Now we just have to put it on the lathe, but we're not quite there yet. We're going to do this as a lidded box. And the way that I'm doing this lidded box, I'm going to do the inside first. And then I'm going to do the outside. So why do I do the inside first? Anybody have any ideas of why to do the inside first?
It's center cut. It's center.
That's about right.
It's in the,
So here's my explanation. I'm going to do a lidded box like that. Well, not like that. More like that. I'm going to have this between centers. I'm going to put a tenon on each end, and I'm going to cut it in half. And, I'm going to lose a little bit of wood when I part it in half. And then I'm going to clean up this face. I'm going to clean up this face. I'm going to form a tenon down here. I've lost a decent amount of wood when I do all of that.
Maybe
So
about
when
a
my
half
box
inch.
goes back together, it can only go back together one of 2 ways. If I do the outside first, I can put it back together.
No.
So my grain lines up like that, but my twist doesn't. Or I can put it together where my twist lines up, but my grain doesn't. If I do the inside first, I account for all of these losses, all this loss of wood where I part through and I need to chew that up, and maybe I'm not very good and I need to do 2 or 3 tenons, and I've lost a little more wood there, which may happen.
About an inch.
I've lost some wood. When I put this back together, if I've done the inside first, I've accounted for all of that loss of wood. There's my joint. My grain lines up, and my twist lines up. So that's why I do the inside of the box first. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to start off between centers on my true center.
Question,
Yes.
the diameter of the inside, is there some relation between that and the diameter?
It's a good question, and I don't know, if I'm being honest. I've never taken the time to figure it out. What's the maximum ratio? This is not going to be a light box. It's not going to be a lightweight box, because there's always going to be, it's triangular on the outside and it's circular on the inside. There's always going to be a lot more wood in the corners. But no, I haven't taken the time to figure out, is there a good ratio? I tend to leave about a 1/2 inch of wall thickness compared to the square piece. We'll do that when we go through things. You can always remove a little more wood from the outside. But if you remove too much from the inside, then you run the risk of cutting through your sidewall where your joint is when you're doing the box. All right, so I'm going to go on the true center here. I'm going to leave this blank square. I do that for a couple of different reasons. I can get a slightly larger triangular shape out of a square piece than I can a round piece. I also leave it square because it's really easy to go over to the bandsaw and cut it in half rather than parting it in half. We're going to part it in half today. And I'm very aware of that because I tried to take my finger off on the bandsaw about 10 years ago. So round pieces on a bandsaw are generally not a good idea. So I'm between centers on my true center. Step number one is I'm going to turn a tenon on each end, and then I'm going to part the box in half. And I say half, it's not really half, it's not 50-50. It's more like 1/3, 2/3, somewhere in that range. It just looks better in my opinion. Some of you may know the golden ratio.
1/3, 2/3.
No, it's not. The golden ratio is
1 to 1.
it's 1.618 something. Anyone know the actual name for the golden ratio?
Mean?
The name. It has a name. So, yes, phi. Very good. Yes.
Phi.
Not pi. Pi is a different number.
5.
But phi. P-H-I. So that's the golden ratio. 1.618. It's supposed to be the most pleasing ratio. For my purposes, 1/3, 2/3 is plenty close enough. That's 1.66 as opposed to 1.61. So we're pretty close in that case.
My ratio is if you don't like it, keep walking.
Very, very quickly, safety. I took off my watch. I took off my wedding ring. I took off my hair. I don't have any jewelry. I don't have long sleeves. My microphone cord is run down the back of my smock. I will wear a face shield the entire time. Always a good idea, rotate the workpiece by hand to make sure you have clearance, especially when the piece is still square. We're going to turn the speed all the way down. We'll turn the lathe on. We'll turn the speed up. If I was in my shop last night turning a pen at 3,200 RPM and I come out the next day and I put a 12-inch bowl blank on there, bad things are going to happen. So always a good idea, turn the speed down.
You can take your light back if you want to.
Yep, thank you. You can always turn the speed up. You probably can't react fast enough to turn the speed down if something were to go wrong. This lathe, you can relocate the controls. I'm not going to do that because this is where the controls are on my lathe. But if something were to go wrong on a situation like this, if your controls are here, you have to reach across that workpiece to get to the controls. So if you can relocate them, that's always a good idea. I do have an emergency kill switch on mine on the other end. But anyway, so tenon on each end, and then we're going to cut it in half. So lathe on, and then we'll start to turn the speed up. That's about 1,500 RPM. Okay, there's my tenon on that end. Real quickly about tenons, I am using a dovetail chuck, so I do have a little bit of a dovetail on there. I want that corner down in there where the tenon meets the shoulder to be a nice, clean, sharp corner, and I want this shoulder here to be flat. I don't want it to be, have any angle to it. Nice, clean, sharp corner. I'm going to go in and clean that up just a little bit with a spindle gouge. Okay, we'll do the same thing on the other end. I am very right-handed. I'm not ambidextrous at all. So I will get into sometimes a little bit of an awkward position making some of these cuts. Just using the bowl gouge to rough it out. Switch back to the spindle gouge, give it a dovetail, clean up that corner. Make it just a hair smaller. And your chuck may not have dovetail jaws, so you may need to do something a little bit different. I brought my own chucks because that's what I know and what I prefer, and mine turn opposite than most. So if I were using, say, your guys' one-ways or something, I'd think I was tightening and I'm actually loosening. So I'm a Nova guy, so that's what I brought with me. All right, so we're going to part this in half. Again, not really half, more like 1/3, 2/3. Turn the speed down a bit to do this. Now, should be good. This is my newest toy. Anybody have one of these?
Yeah, last
Yeah.
one had one.
They were selling some in Franklin. It's not a box cutter like the guy used to do his Saturn balls. It's actually a little Japanese pole saw. You can get them on Amazon for like $13.
Yeah.
Pretty slick, huh?
Nice.
Amazon has them. I checked the other day for about $13. I think I paid $15 for mine when I bought it, but that was $15 shipped from Japan. That's amazing. It took like 3 weeks to get here, but the world is so small these days. All right, so we should be able to just twist that off. All right, so we'll back this off. I'm going to put these here, and we're going to go into a chuck. The rest of this, on the inside is pretty much box making 101. But I'll kind of walk through things as I go through. I prefer to do the lid first. I prefer to do a recess in the lid and a tenon on the body. I think it's easier to fit a tenon to a recess than it is to try and fit a recess to a tenon. All right. First operation here is I need to face this off because that was a really nasty parting cut. So I want to make this as flat and as cleanly cut as I can get it. This is the mating surface on the top of the box. So we want to get this as well cut as we possibly can. Bevel rubbing cut with a bowl gouge. This is end grain work, this is spindle work, but we can use a bowl gouge for that. I'm going to take one more pass at that. And this does have to be as flat as we can get it. So we want to check this with a straight edge, or I typically just use the back side of my gouge. Check that, looks like I'm a little bit hollow. Yep, I'm definitely hollow. So I need to take more off from the corners and none out of the center. I want this to be as flat as I can possibly get it. So this is more of a shear stick. I'm just dragging that bottom wing across the surface.
Pull your microphone up, Jason.
Thank you. My beard's getting in the way. So I took too much off of the outside. I'm now high in the center. So I'm going to take a little bit more out of the center. I'm going to hollow this out. So I'm not too concerned about the very center, but I want to have this as flat as I can get it. Check that. I'm a little bit high in the center. I can see that, but
It's coming out.
yep, the center's going to go away in just a second here. So I'll take a little bit more. think we're gonna call that good anyway, but we wanna make sure and try and get this surface as flat as we can possibly get it. So now we're gonna hollow this out.
Jason,
Yes,
instead of playing with that, I know I have a lot of problems getting that really flat. Would it be better to use a planing board?
you could, yeah. Sandpaper,
Yeah.
like glued onto a flat board, yeah, that would work. So the question was, I think over here, somewhere about the ratio of the inside. Is it you? Okay.
Big.
So,
Make it bigger than the outside.
yeah. So I'm gonna leave about that much towards the outside. So if we can get in on that. So that ½ inch that I was kind of talking about, that's that distance there. Not to the corner, because the corners are going to go away, but relative to this flat face, I'm leaving about a ½ inch there. I can always take more off from the outside. I can never put wood back on. All right, so we're going to haul this out very quickly here, and then we'll put a little recess in there. I like a kind of a hemispherical shape inside of here. I'm going to hit that with a round nose scraper real quick just to clean that up just a tiny bit. And then we'll put in our recess and the lid will be done on the inside. Any questions so far? This is pretty basic box making. It's just the outside that gets a little bit fancy. All right, so I'm going to put a little recess in here, about an 1/8 inch wide, about an 1/8 inch deep. Doesn't have to be a big or deep recess. That's all we need, and then I'm just going to kiss that edge. It raised a little bit of fibers right there, so I'm just going to touch that edge with the scraper one more time. All right. There's our lid. Any questions? All right. So we will set that aside, and we'll move on to the body. First operation on the body is to face it off, just like we did the lid. This is the New Zealand chuck, the Technitool or Nova. It's lefty-tighty, righty-loosey, which is why I do prefer to bring my own. I know what size jaws these are. I know exactly what they take. I know the shape of the dovetail, and I know that they turn backwards compared to pretty much everything else. So, first operation here, face this off. All right. It could be a little bit cleaner. Is this my mating surface for the lid of the box? No, it's not. The mating surface is an 1/8 inch that way. The only portion of this surface that's going to be visible in the finished box is the top of my tenon. That's what this surface is. The mating surface, the one that has to be clean and flat, is an 1/8 inch that way, hopefully. Maybe a 1/4 inch that way. So we'll start to turn that surface now. I always like, a little bit hollow, I can see that already. I always like to turn my tenon first and get the tenon size, and then I'll hollow it out. If you hollow it out first, you're going to have a tendency to hollow too much, and you're not going to have any meat left on it for your tenon. Oh, one thing I forgot to do, I sometimes forget to do this, I like to put a reference mark on here, so I know how it goes back together.
Is that right?
Always better to put it back together where the grain is lined up and you know that it's going to go, as opposed to trying to figure out every time where it actually goes. I guess I actually did have kind of a reference mark there with my reference corner that we did originally, but I like to put one just on the face. So I've got to be a little bit smaller on my tenon. I know I'm a little bit concave here, so I need to flatten that out. So I'll flatten that out and reduce the diameter of the tenon. On my tenon, I have a tendency to put a little bit of a taper on it, and then I went too far. Yeah, but I'm really close. It's definitely too loose. I do want this to be a really tight tenon because we're going to go back between centers, and we don't want this thing to twist when we're turning it. That's the last thing that we want. So we're going to have to take another 1/8 of an inch, nice clean cut, but I know I need to be just slightly larger than the tenon I have here. I generally like to put a little bit of a taper on the tenon, find where it starts to fit, and then straighten the taper out. I just went just a hair too far. Now, my tenon is too long for the recess I have here, so I have to cut the end of the tenon off. Otherwise, it will bottom out in here before I even come close to this joint. I'm a little bit concave again as well. So I have to clean up the corners. How we did. I do have a little bit of a taper on there. Just a tiny bit too small again. I'm sure this never happens to anyone else, right? Cut that tenon off again because it was too long. I have much more of a taper on it this time. That's going to go that way. Okay, so we're not quite fitting onto the tenon, so we'll just reduce that diameter and straighten it out just a hair. That feels like it was too much.
We're gonna have 2 tops.
It's all right. It could be better.
It'd be a flat box.
We're gonna do famous last words. One more cut.
Make 2 more and forget the last one.
The guys who were in the class yesterday, we did the Saturn Bowl. I turned a jam chuck. First time. it was pretty much perfect the very first cut. Honestly, I don't really mind when this happens. It makes me look human again. There we go. All right. I'm happy with that one now. Joint looks pretty good. It could be a little bit flatter, but I'm not going to waste any more time on it. So we need to hollow out the body. I'm a turner, so I generally prefer to turn it out, but to save time, we're going to drill out. Okay, we're going to drill out a fair amount of it. turn the lathe speed way down to do the drilling. Maybe not that far down. Again, I don't hollow out the box first because I want to make sure I have plenty of meat for my tenon. Obviously, in this case, I do have plenty. So I'm going to go in with a bowl gouge, and I'm going to do kind of pull cuts coming from the inside out. Could have gone deeper. Oh well. So I'm going to open this up. I'm going to clean up the bottom. I like to put again, a hemispherical kind of shape on the bottom inside. I'm definitely going to get rid of that point in the center from the Forstner bit. Try to speed up a bit. So, pull cut from the inside to the outside. Working on that hemispherical shape on the inside. One other thing I forgot to mention, and we didn't do these in the class, but when I do a class with these, it always happens. When you go between centers to start and you're putting your tenons on here before you cut it in half, don't face off and clean up the ends of your tenons because you're going to turn away the numbers that you just put on there. Someone in the class almost always does that. Yeah. All right, so I'm going to go in with the scraper real quick and just clean that up a little bit on the bottom inside. Inside of that done. Any questions there? Oh, there's some roughness. Oh, well, it's the inside. Nobody will see it. All right, any questions there? Fairly basic box making 101. Now we get to the fancy part. So we're going to take this off, set it aside. We're going to get rid of the chuck here. Hopefully. So those who have done Barbara's method, what do you think of mine? Pretty simple. Has to be pretty simple because I need to be able to teach it.
There it is. I knew it was somewhere. Barbara's method. They don't show it, but
Yep. And just don't get me wrong. I like Barbara. She's fabulous. She has a great book on multi-axis turning that goes way more in depth than I could ever go. She's invented a whole glossary of terms that are really great for describing how things work. But I do think my method for doing the twist is easier. All right, so we're going to go between centers. We're done with our actual true centers until we go to do the top and the bottom of the box. So we're going to go 0.1 on this side to 0.1 on this side, and that's our 120-degree twist. So there's point number 1 there.
put it where you need. See.
Move this in a little bit. There's point number 1 there. And now we just turn this face. Looks a little bit scary, doesn't it? It's actually more balanced than if we put the piece on parallel centers. The weight is distributed, diagonally across the piece. If we were going on parallel centers, the weight would be distributed all on the one side, and it would be, whipping around a lot more. This
Jason?
looks, yeah.
Do you find the drive centers, do you prefer a larger one or a smaller one?
I use both. It depends on the size of the blank. If I were doing a spindle, something maybe 2 inches, inch and a half, maybe 2 inches square, I would probably use a smaller drive center, maybe a 5/8. This is a 1 inch. I do absolutely prefer the step centers or the multi-tooth centers as opposed to your standard 4-prong center, because I'm on an angle here. And I'd rather have 8 or 10 of these little teeth digging in than 1 or 2 of those, the big 4 prongs. So I really prefer these. They had some out here last night. I know at least one of the guys in the class bought one last night for like 20 bucks. So they're really pretty cheap. They're the Penn State ones. Mine are the Woodcraft ones. They're a Wood River brand. But I really love and prefer those. And I don't use a 4-prong center for anything. I use these multi-tooth centers for everything. So we're going to draw a few more pictures on the board here. So we want to get the lights back up here again if we can. I do draw a lot of pictures, and I apologize for that, but
The honest way we can understand.
visually,
From the
yeah.
south, you want to see?
All right, so when we do this, if I put my spindle on the leg, between the centers like that, well, not the true centers, but imagine we're between diagonal centers. If I put my piece on this way, and then I turn this face, say face number 1, I'm turning away there, and I'm turning away there. Then I'm going to go and put it on center number 2, say right there. And I'm going to turn on this axis, I'm going to turn that face and that face, right? It's parallel to that one, parallel to that one. This is parallel here, parallel to there. What happens in my finished piece, I'm not going to draw the 3rd axis because that would just get even more confusing. But what happens is our finished piece actually ends up kind of like this. As you can see, I'm removing a lot more wood on this corner and a lot more wood on this corner. And our finished piece actually ends up with kind of a waist. And I'll
Kind of like a football shape.
pass around here a little bit, yeah. So I'll pass these around. You can kind of see
Yeah.
it's a little bit fatter in the center, which actually works to our advantage because we're going to, this is a box and there's my joint. It gives me a little more material around my joint as opposed to the ends. Now, if we don't want that, we can counteract that. How do we counteract that? I'm going to turn a straight line here. To counteract that, rather than turning a straight line, I would just turn a very shallow cove all along the length. So I'll pass these 2 pieces around. This one has been turned as just a straight line, and you can see it's a little bit bowed out in the center. This one has been turned with a very shallow cove, and you see that it's straighter, or it appears to be more straight. You'll also notice these twist in opposite directions. So we'll send those around, and we will get started here. I do have a few more samples that I'll pass around. We don't have time to do these today, but these are just some more multi-axis spindles, very simple. These are all turned on just 2 axes, except for this one, which does have the twist. So just some ideas. If we had more time, I would have done a set of those. But with your announcements and your break and stuff, we don't have time, and I have other stuff I want to do that's higher priority for me. All right, so we are between centers. I'm putting this piece because I do not want it to twist when we're actually turning the piece. We're rotating the piece by hand to make sure we have clearance over the tool rest. Very important, especially when a piece is set diagonally like this. If I have my tool rest too close, it's going to hit. So always rotate the piece by hand. Make sure you have clearance over the workpiece. I like to minimize the overhang of the tool as much as possible. Speed. I'm probably going to be about 2,500 RPM, somewhere in that range. That's about 1,900. We're good there. We'll knock off the corners. and then we'll start to move on. Things will get smoother as we get, less and less square and more triangular. All of my cuts are going to be going downhill. So back to here. I'm cutting straight, but effectively what I'm doing is always cutting downhill, cutting towards the end of the piece. We don't want to climb back up the hill. If you've ever gone skiing, it's really easy to slide down the hill, but doing this kind of climb back up the hill with your skis is not very much fun. Same thing with the wood. Just going to use a spindle roughing gouge. All of the cuts going from a larger diameter to a smaller diameter. I don't like to cut into the end of a workpiece, so I'm going to turn the gouge over and cut the other direction. The flute of the gouge should always be pointed in the direction of the cut. If I'm cutting to the left, the flute of the gouge should be pointed to the left. If I'm cutting to the right, the flute should be pointed to the right. Good rule of thumb is 45, 45, 45. I want the gouge 45 degrees to the ground. I don't want it parallel or perpendicular to the ground, but about 45 degrees. I want the flute rotated 45 degrees in the direction of the cut. So if I'm cutting to the left, I want the flute rotated to 45 degrees to the left. If I'm cutting to the right, 45 degrees to the right. And then I want to approach the wood at 45 degrees. I don't want to come 90 degrees this way or 90 degrees this way. I want to come in at about 45 degrees depending on the direction of the cut. So 45, 45, 45, pretty basic rule of thumb. So 45 degrees to the ground, rotate to about 45 degrees, and I'm approaching the wood at about 45 degrees. And you may find that you need to lift the handle a little bit more. You may find that you need to rotate the gouge, open and close a little bit more. You'll also find that the wood cuts better one direction than the other. I'm sure these cuts are terrible. So a little bit more. This facet needs to go away. This is my face that we're turning right now, and you can actually already start to see that twist happening on that face. It'll become more apparent in just a second. I can now also move my tool rest in a lot closer. I never want to be more than about an inch over the tool rest as much as I can help it. So the turning here is actually pretty simple. I'm turning a straight line. That's all I'm turning. It's all about body control. You'll notice I'm not moving my arms. I'm kind of locked in and I'm swaying from foot to foot. I'm dancing with the lathe. There's that face. I've got a little bit of tear. I'm going to try and take care of that. But there's my first face with the twist. And that's all just because of the numbering. So I'm going to try and clean this face up, take one last pass on it, get this as good as we can, and then we'll move to face number 2. Didn't feel good right around the joint, and then try and go the other direction. That still didn't feel good. A little bit better.
That's good.
Yeah, I got some tear out there, but that's probably going to go away on one of the other faces. So,
Depth of cut is even all the way across, right? To get the stop.
sorry?
The depth of cut is all the way across.
No.
See?
No. Because like I said, if I wanted to straighten out that piece, I would do a slight cove. I could do a deep cove that comes out to a shallower, less steep cove
Right.
on one end. You can play with that shape. I tend to do straight. But
So
you,
for right now, what
Yeah.
you've done is straight.
yeah, I've done straight, but you don't have to. You can play with all sorts of other shapes.
That's what I was gonna say, he was talking about you have the same length of the gouge sticking across the end of it,
Yeah.
all the way across.
Yep, I do, but you don't have to do that. You can do
Cove
coves,
in,
you can
I'll
do,
cove out.
you can play with other shapes. I've actually started to play around. I have a spindle I've been working on at home that I used a beading tool like for the basket illusion pieces, and I've done a series of beads on each of the 3 faces. And I think if I get it right, it would actually turn out to be a spiral that would go all the way around the piece. Having said that, a lot of people think, well, if I turn a piece this long, it's going to spiral like that, right? No, it doesn't work that way. If my piece is this long, it's a 120-degree twist, but it's a very slow, gradual twist. If my piece is this long, it's a 120-degree twist, but it's really fast. So yeah, you only get the one twist, but doing that with the beads, if I get it lined up properly, and I'm still working on it, I think it would eventually appear to be more or less a constant spiral of beads all the way around the piece. All right, I'm gonna try this one more time. Yeah.
You're doing 3 faces with the 3 axes. How do you know you've taken off enough of the first one?
We'll get there.
to go to the second one?
We'll get there. You can always come back. We're doing it between centers, so you can always come back to a previous center. We'll talk about how do we judge the widths of the faces, how do we try and keep things even. You can always put it back and you can always take more on. If I had a facet in the middle of my blank from where there was a flat from my original square piece, I know I would have to take that further. I'm estimating I want to go about 40% of the diameter of the piece, because eventually it's going to end up, hopefully if we do this right, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, which is 33%. I'm going to go a little bit past that, and some of that's going to go away on the other faces. All right, try this one more time, one more pass on here, and then we're going to move on to number 2. That felt better. Much better. I'm much happier with that. I do have a little bit of a gap here. That's because my faces weren't completely flat. So that's why I think it's important to have those faces as flat as you can get them so that you don't have a little gap there, so that they actually make perfectly flat. So that's face number 1. Any questions there? All right, so this is number 2. And I didn't do it, but it probably wouldn't be a bad idea to take a center punch or an awl or something and actually mark those points. All right, rotate my hand, make sure we have clearance. I'm going to turn the speed down, and now we can turn the speed up. Just double checking. 1, 2, 3, clockwise. 1, 2, 3, counterclockwise. And I'm on 2 and 2. This is the point where, sometimes it gets screwed up. You can't read your numbers or they weren't numbered properly. So never a bad idea to double check. I'm going to knock the corners off here. A little more pressure there. Stop and check our progress. So this was face number 1 that we just did. This is face number 2 that we're working on right now. I have a little facet there, but there is my corner from where those 2 faces intersect. Little facet there, so we have a little bit to go still, but you can see that twist happening already. So we'll do a little more on this face.
Is your speed your friend?
Yeah, in this case, because you're cutting maximum 1/3 wood and 2/3 air. So turning fast is beneficial. Your tool doesn't know that it's cutting air as much, and I find you get cleaner cuts. So yes, speed is your friend. Or we can crank this up a little bit. That's about 2100. How are we doing on time? What time is it? 10:20? Okay, and you guys want to break about 11:15, 11:30? Okay, we're in good shape. All right, so again, face number 1 that we did just a second ago, this is face number 2. A little bit of tear out, so I'm going to try and clean that up. But that looks pretty good, and there's our corner. We've got a nice 120-degree twist along there. I'm going to take it down a little bit further, just looking at a few things here. We're going to go just a little bit further. Bring the feet up just a little bit more. One more pass here. So we will call face number 2, which is right here, we'll call that done. It's pretty clean, I'm pretty happy with that. So now we go to face number 3. And again, the turning on this is actually very, very simple. I'm turning a straight line. That's all I'm turning. You don't have to turn just a straight line, but that's what I'm doing. All right, so that's number 3. Make sure everything's locked down nice and tight. Speed down, lathe on, and now we can start to turn it up. Knock those corners back. Rotate the wheel the other direction, so I'm cutting to the right now. Just turning a straight line.
Are you using the ghost image? Are you using
No.
the ghost image at all?
No, I'm
You
not.
don't want to do that, do you?
You can't. The ghost image on the inside is kind of football shaped.
Yeah.
And it has no relation to the shape I'm turning on the outside. It's because I've removed more material from here and gotten that shape on the other 2 faces. But it has no correlation to what I'm doing on this
In other words,
face.
we really don't want to use that
Yeah.
as a guide.
So this was number 1, this was number 2, this is number 3. Still have a little facet there, so I know I need to go a little bit more. And then we're going to get to your question in just a second about how do we keep these things
Balance.
even, yeah, and balanced. I'm a little more light here. So a little bit more here. I'm thinking what I'm going to have to do, I'm probably going to have to cut this direction on this face. We've got the grain angled here, and if you guys who do a lot of flat work, you may know, if you put a board through a planer and the grain is maybe angled in the board, you can get really bad tear out going one direction. Turn the board around and send it through the other direction, and it's fine. Kind of the same thing here because we're turning this piece on an angle. So 1 or 2 of the faces you may be fine cutting right to left. One of the other, maybe 1 or 2 faces, you may have to cut left to right because the grain is angled. And I think that's what's happening a little bit on this face. So I'm going to try to make a cut from, I was going right to left, I'm going to try and cut left to right on this face. Did. I've got some tear out on the joint, so We're going to try and take one more cut on there, and then we'll get to your question about evenness. Also, probably wouldn't be a bad idea to sharpen your tool at this point. I'm not gonna, but wouldn't be a bad idea.
That's your job, too.
That's my job.
Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. It's pretty cleanly cut. It's not too bad. There's a little bit of tear out down here, but my joint is good, so I'm happy. So, how do we sand this? We could do like, somebody had a suggestion over here of a flat board. Because if you sand this on the lathe or with the lathe running, you're going to have a tendency to roll over these corners. And we just spent a lot of time making sure we had nice, clean, sharp corners, so that's not good. We always want to try and get the best possible cuts we can get. I typically tend to sand these by hand with the grain along the faces and be very careful at the corners. But you know, if you can get really good clean cuts, you don't need a lot of sanding. So now to your question, how much do you need to remove? I would go a little over a third for the first face and then try to match that on the other two. How do we know that it's even? Visually, we can just kind of check the widths of the faces. This one's a little bit narrow. This one's a little bit fat. This one's probably in the middle. I can check the face relative to the tenon. So this face goes just barely into the tenon there. This face goes into the tenon a fair amount, and this face is a little bit shy of the tenon. These two are closer together. This one's definitely further away. I can't necessarily check this tenon to this tenon because I didn't measure my tenons. I just made them, and they may not be the same size. But I can check these three faces relative to the tenon. They're pretty even. I can also check the reveal on the inside of the box. Do I have a face like this one and this one a little bit that has more wood than the other two? So which face do I need to turn? So if we look at this, if we put it back on here, this is a narrow face, this is a medium face, and this is a wide face. Which of the three faces do I need to turn? I need to turn the narrow one. So again, talking about a planer a little bit. If I put a board shaped like this through a planer, every pass the board gets thinner and thinner and thinner, but this face gets wider and wider and wider. Same effect here. We want to turn the narrow face. Be aware that as we're turning that narrow face, we're also removing material from both of the adjoining faces. So as this face gets narrower, the adjoining faces also get, as this face gets wider, the adjoining faces also get narrower. So you probably don't have to take off a whole lot of material, and you will start to impact the other faces. But that's how I check to make sure things are kind of even. I've got 4 spots I can check. Visually, I can check the faces, I can check this tenon, I can check this tenon, and I can check the reveal on the inside. Does that hopefully answer your question? All right. So, which face is my narrow one? Let's say I had turned away my numbers for some reason. I numbered outside of my circle. This is the face I need to turn. The point is always opposite or furthest away from that face. So I can go to this. It happens to be point number 2. I'm going to trace this around with my finger so that this face is closest to my tool rest, and the point is furthest away. I can see the numbers. I know it's point number 2. But if I just trace this along with my finger, that face is the one that's closest to the tool rest. That's where the material is going to be removed, so I know that I'm on the right face. So I can do this even without the numbers. If I happen to turn them away, or the center points chewed them up and I can no longer read them, just visually I can see the point is furthest away from the face, the point is furthest away from the face. I know I'm on the correct face. So I haven't accidentally put it on here, 2 to 3 or whatever. So we'll take one quick pass on here, and then we'll finish off the top and the bottom real quick. And then, if we have time, we could maybe do a couple of those sample spindles. Like I said, you don't have to take a whole lot of material off because you're removing material from both of the adjoining faces. at the same time. That's pretty bad. I got some really nasty tear out there. So I'll take one more pass there and get that cleaned up, and then we'll do the top and the bottom. And you know, it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. Most people won't notice if the faces are pretty close, but they're not exact. And you can do some other things to disguise it. So this face, that's number one. That's now a little bit narrower, but for the sake of time, we're going to call that good. So any questions on turning that multi-axis with a twist? All right, we'll finish the top and the bottom real quick. I'm just going to use jam chucks to do that. Everyone think they can do this? I mean, the turning is simple. It really is. I'm turning a straight line. That's all I'm doing. All right, so we'll put the chuck back in here. A little jam chuck I turned yesterday for the class. We'll use this a couple of times today. And all right, so we're going to back this off just a little bit. So which side of this do I finish first?
Top.
I like to finish the top first. Why do I finish the top first?
The smallest.
No, I have a reason. I have a legit reason.
You got your tendon sticking out there to grab hold of.
Well, I'm going to turn a tenon on here that's going to go inside of here, like this tenon.
Right.
And then to finish this, I'm going to turn a tenon that goes inside of here. I don't do
A recess.
I don't do female jam chucks. I don't do recessed jam chucks. I always do male
You do something
tenon.
good on the inside.
The reason I do the
Both of
lid
them.
first is this is larger.
Wider,
This
yeah.
tenon is wider, so I can turn that to fit on there, and then I can turn that tenon down to fit on here. If I did this side first, I would have to turn this tenon away
Right.
to do a larger tenon to do this one. So there is a logical reason why I do the top first.
Waste
yeah.
less wood.
Yep. I waste less wood. And also at home, I don't put my jam chucks in a chuck. I actually have them drilled and tapped, and they thread onto my spindle, and they go back to the same spot every single time. You know, with the chuck, you know, we used this one yesterday. It's running pretty true, but if you know, as you move things in and out of a chuck, a lot of times they don't go back in the exact same spot, and they need to be trued up. All right, so we're going to do. I'm just going to use a parting tool to do this. Guesstimate where I got to go. Okay, quite a bit further. I do like to have a nice flat shoulder there for this flat shoulder to reference up against. It's pretty close. Okay. That was pretty lucky. I'm going to bring the tailstock up just to be on the safe side. I will have to remove it in just a minute. Now the top of the box, you guys saw the one that's being passed around. The top of the box, I like to have a little bit of a dome on it. The bottom, I undercut, do a little bit of a sweep, and then hollow out the bottom of the box just a little bit. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to go with the spindle gouge. I want to minimize the wood that I'm taking off of this as much as possible, because this started off with a 120-degree twist. If for whatever reason, you know, I'm going to exaggerate a little bit, I only ended up with half of my box, that's only a 60-degree twist. So the more material you remove, the less of a twist it actually has. that's as much as I can remove with the tailstock in place. So now I'm relying just on the jam chuck itself. That's why we have that.
Right here, right here. Right here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Tom, when you put that on video, you need to slow that part down.
We need to cut that part out.
Felt like I did.
That tunnel wall will help, doesn't it?
Only in my mind.
We're gonna slow, yes.
I was just about to ask you, could you come from the end, push it toward the front and minimize the
Yeah,
possibility of that?
you really should be. I'm trying to rub the bevel and push against the piece as I cut across. The alternative is you can cut towards the headstock and push the piece back onto, which I'm probably going to do now.
After shearing the snot out of it.
Yeah, and we could put a wrap of painter's tape around here. You know, if I like at home, I said I do the tapped and thread, so they thread onto the spindle. I'll pull a vacuum on it and just have that as a little bit of extra insurance. Oh, we got a pretty big ding in there. Oh well. So I'm pushing against the workpiece, pushing it that way, making these cuts. And now I'm pushing with the bevel. Alright. We'll call that good. Would sand that real quick, but I didn't bring any sandpaper.
Need some?
Nope. We're fine.
Trying to get away from sanding.
We got some tin grit.
So this should be about the same diameter. This should be the same diameter as this. So all I need to remove is the thickness of my tenon here. Stop and check that. A little bit more. And I'm just using the parting tool. This is all torn out, but it doesn't matter. This is just a jig. Too much.
Talking to me, isn't it?
Either one of them.
Still too much. Jim, you got any more of these jam chucks I can?
You got plenty of wood over there.
I think you have some more.
Oh, that's still too small.
I say wood.
There's plenty in here, but this is fine. Is that good?
It's got a slight edge on it, not much.
No, it's just a hair too big. But the difference between a good fit and oh shit is not very much.
Oh snap.
That's fine.
Is that it, Terry?
It snapped.
All right.
Snap.
Terry says it's good.
Good enough government work anyway.
I don't know if I should be offended by that or not.
He said government, not DMV.
Get on, get over.
So I'm going to cut the corner back a little bit and then undercut the bottom. ultimately it's just going to sit on a little bit of a ring around it. It's not going to have an actual
And you're
ring,
going-
but just where it curves down and then curves back up, it will just sit on that ring down at the bottom. But you know, you can do whatever you want to do with these. I actually have some that are round bottomed, and I turn a little ring for them to actually sit on. So there's a little reveal at the bottom. You know, I do that not only so it sits on, you know, it's going to sit on a ring all the way around here, but I do that relief so it puts a little shadow underneath the piece and it doesn't look as heavy. It's a subtle thing, but you notice it without noticing. Yeah, it gives it lift.
Kind of like it's floating a little bit.
Yeah, and people don't know why, but it looks better. I mean, normal people, we know why. We're not normal. And then I always undercut the bottom of these. I think we probably about all of us know that, you know, wood's alive, really. Even after it's been cut, you know, it's still going to move.
Yeah.
You know, it'll move with changes in humidity and temperature and barometric pressure and all that stuff. And if I left the bottom of this completely flat, sometimes when it moves, it might, you know, swell back up in a little bit. Sometimes it's going to swell out a little bit, and if it swells out, it's not going to sit flat. So if you do a little bit of a concave on this, I think it looks better overall. But you know, even if the wood moves a little bit, it's still going to be able to sit nicely because it's only sitting on the outside ring, not on that actual true center point there. All right, let's try and do this without throwing it off the lid. Nope.
Well, you made your ring on the bottom, huh?
Yeah, there's a little bit of a dent there. Let me do this the other way here. All right, good enough. Obviously, we would sand that. A little dent on there. It matches the dent on the lid.
Gotta have it corresponding.
And there we go. So again, this is why I do the inside first, is I can get the best grain match I can get and get the twist to line up at the same time. So there is, oops, right there. Lidded box with a twist. How are we doing on time? What time is it?
Quarter to 11.
Oh, wow.
You want a break, David, or?
Yeah.
Let's, if you don't mind, let's do a couple of spindles. Let's do these real quick. That'll probably take me about 20 minutes or so, and then we'll take a break, and then we'll come back and we'll work on the Saturn ball. How's that sound? All right. So, 2 spindles, real quick here. These are my 2 favorite ones. The others are fun, but they're not my favorites. So I'm going to mark a couple of centers on these. Yeah.
Give a break.
Okay, that's fine. All right, go ahead and take a break. I'll get set up for these 2 spindles real quick.
Let's go! Come on, Sam! Come on,
Put
Dave.
these wheels on.
Tell my mom on you. All right, Jason, you're on.
Okay, thank you. Get that microphone a little closer to my mouth. All right, so real quickly, we're going to turn a couple of quick multi-axis spindles. These are my two favorite multi-axis spindles to turn. They got passed around. Hopefully, you guys already saw them. We're going to do the one on the top. I'm probably going to do them in reverse order, but we're going to do the one on the top, which kind of has a couple of sine waves on it, and then we're going to do the one on the bottom that comes down, takes a jog, and then goes on. So if you're interested in multi-axis work, I've already mentioned Barbara Dill. The other person I would mention is Mark Spheri from Pennsylvania. Does some fabulous multi-axis work. He has a whole series of baseball bats that he's done.
Yeah, I've done
They're
some
rejects
bats.
from the bat factory.
He's demonstrated here before.
Okay, good. So you guys know Mark. So we'll do a couple of these real quick. So we're going to do the bottom one first, which has kind of that little jog in it. So I have set up already, I've drawn a couple of points on here. I have my reference corner right at the top, and I've just eyeballed a couple of points. They're maybe about a ½ inch apart. And again, rotate around that reference corner so I make sure that those points are parallel. If they're not parallel, we'll start to get a little bit of a twist. We've already done a twist, so we're not gonna do that again. So we'll put this on here on parallel points.
Offset handle for tree wear.
You could do all sorts of stuff with this. All right. Face shield on. Blade speed all the way down. Rotate by hand to make sure we have clearance. And now we'll turn it on, and we'll start to turn the speed up. So this one that I'm going to do, again, this is the one that goes down and jogs. I'm going to kind of imagine my blank in half. And I'm going to turn, on one half, I'm going to turn a cove into a bead. And I'm going to shift it to the other axis, and I'm going to turn a bead into a cove, but on the other half. Now you'll notice these coves need to be on the other side of center. And that's really important, otherwise why we end up with these facets on the inside. So turning here is very, very simple. I'm turning a bead into, a cove into a cylinder. Set on my face a little bit more. Speed up. Same as the other stuff you're doing this morning. Speed really helps when doing this. All of my cuts going downhill. Probably should have sharpened my gouge during the break, but that's all right. We're not going to do too much more of this. I'm going to go just a hair further, but there is my bead going into a true cylinder. That could definitely be cleaner, but for today it's a demo. We're doing this pretty quick here. So I'm going to shift it, both ends, both axes. And this one does get pretty close to the edge there. And now I'm going to do the same thing, but on this end. So my cove is going to start here, and my cylinder is going to be down here. So all of my cuts are going to be going towards the tailstock on this end. Stop and take a look. I'm guessing I'm going to have maybe a facet or two still right here. I do. So I have to go a little bit further. This needs to go away, that needs to go away, everything else is fine. Alright, that should do it. So
Spatula on the end of it?
yeah, I mean, very easy to turn, very straightforward, and you end up with a kind of a cool shape. If I wanted to continue this and have it, you know, this goes out and then it jogs away from me. If this were longer, we could come down and we could have it jog back and end up on the original center on this end as well. But just very simple, kind of fun to play with. So there we go. So we'll do this one somewhat similar. So I'm
You
gonna,
just find it quicker and easier to use a spindle rough and gouge rather than...
yeah, I've practiced a lot with turning, you know, big, long straights and big sweeping coves and
rather than
beads.
using a bow gouge or another
Yeah.
spindle.
You can use whatever.
Jason,
Maybe not a
before you
skew.
get much further, could you show us how you mark the ends of that?
Yeah, I just eyeballed them. So there's my reference corner. I just put a little mark just about a 1/4 inch on either side of center. Rotate around my reference corner, same thing on that end. So I just eyeballed it. I didn't measure anything.
Can't have fun if you have to measure all the time.
I never measure anything. I mean, really, I really don't. All right, I got to explain this one a little bit. So on this one, it's a little bit different. On this face, I'm going to turn a bead, a cove, and a bead. And then I'm going to shift to the other axis, and I'm going to do the opposite of that. I'm going to turn a cove, a bead, and a cove. And that's where that sine wave comes from. So my philosophy is always remove the material where it needs to be removed from first. The cove is going to be the deepest. That's where the most material is going to come away from. So that's where I'm going to start. I'm going to turn the cove in here. Then I'll turn the outsides, and then we'll smooth everything out. So my cove's going to be right here in the center. You notice all of my cuts are going downhill. Once I reach the bottom of the cove, I'm not climbing back up that hill. I'll stop, rotate the gouge, and cut downhill from the other direction. Okay, so there's my cove. I'm going to start to form the bead, which means removing the material from the outside. I like nice sweeping shapes on these. So let's stop and take a look on this one. So I still have a couple of big facets here, but that's where the cove is going to go on the other face, so that's okay. I probably want to take a little bit more off. It's a little bit too high. I want to just flatten that out a little bit, and then we'll do the same thing on this end. Alright, same thing on this end. Right now we're turning on center. Sorry? I'm on center right now. Sorry, one more time?
Are we on center?
No, we're not on
We're
center.
on
We-
the outside.
Yes, we only had 2 center points. They were both a 1/4 inch the other side of center.
Ah.
This does not get turned on the true center.
But you're obviously turning parallel, right?
The same points on either end?
Yes, they're parallel on both ends,
Okay.
but nothing is on center.
Right.
Okay. Put on center.
we may have to go back to this face. That's fine. We can always go back because everything's between centers. But I'm going to shift this and we'll start to work on the other face real quick. So I'm shifting both ends. And again, nothing is on the true center. These marks were about 1/4 inch either side of center. So now this face, I have to do the opposite of what I just did. So I'm going to put a cove here and a cove here. I'm going to have a bead. The top of my bead is going to be right there. So everything has to be downhill from that bead. My coves have to be lower than the top of that bead. Again, this is where the majority of the material needs to come out of. So that's where I'm going to start. I don't know if you guys can see it on the TV. Can you see the shadow in there? Can you see that?
Well, we have it.
Don't go down to that shadow. If you go down, all the way down to the shadow, it's round. And we don't want this to be round. This should have a football shaped cross section all along the length. If we go down, all the way down to that shadow, this would be round, and we don't want to go that far. So this looks pretty good. We're going to do the same thing on this end, and then we just need to take a little bit off the top of the bead and roll it down into those two coves. Again, stay just out of that shadow that's in there. Looks pretty good. Again, I'm not fully round. I have a little bit of that football shape there. This is the top of my bead, so we're going to take a little bit off the top of that because we don't want this to be round. It's round in the center right now, so I have to take a little bit off and then just roll that bead down into those coves.
So you're saying a little bit of a shadow on
Here and here, yes. If you go all the way to the shadow, it's round. And we don't want to go there. If that happens, we shift back to the other axis and we take a little bit more off of this face. All right, top of the bead and then roll it down into each of the two coves and we'll be done. May need to take just a hair more off the top of that bead. No, I think we're all right. I could take just, I'm going to take one more cut. One more cut. All right, we're going to call that good and we're going to move on. So, all right. I'm reasonably happy with that. And the turning is, again, pretty straightforward. And you end up with this kind of cool shape. All right, that's it for multi-axis. Any questions on that?
What would you use those for?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I have done, in the first slide presentation we went through, I've done some goblets. That, I put them back on the true center and turned a little tenon on each end and used them for the stem of a goblet. That's about the only thing I can come up with. It's not practical at all, but it's fun and it's creative and it looks. I love making stuff that does not look like it was turned on a lathe. I've turned cubes on a lathe, and I like to do a lot of multi-axis, off-axis work. And so on. So